My name is Emma Grace Holloway. I live in a house too big for one person, talk to shadows more than to people, and I haven't truly laughed in 427 days. The last time I did, someone was still alive who isn't anymore. That's the kind of silence I live with. And this is the story of the day a stranger on 4 legs waited at my door and didn't leave. The wind had a way of getting in. No matter how tightly she sealed the windows, no matter how thick the curtains or how many times she wedged old towels under the sills, it always found its way in. A whisper through the hall, a cold finger down, her neck. Emma used to imagine it was her partner still trying to reach her from wherever he'd gone, but over time, she stopped imagining. The house simply groaned with emptiness now, and the wind was just that. Wind. It was Thursday, early October, and the sky was the color of bruised fruit, purples, grays, and something that looked almost green if you stared too long. Rain threatened, but hadn't yet started. Emma stood in the kitchen, staring into a mug she hadn't touched. The tea had gone cold an hour ago. She didn't mind. She liked how it steamed up the window, how it left little ghosts on the glass. And that's when she saw him. At first, she thought he was just a trick of the stormlight. But no. There, beyond the overgrown rosebush, was a dog. Big, broad-shouldered, motionless. His coat was thick, matted in places, black with streaks of gray along his muzzle. He wasn't on the porch, just on the edge of her gravel path, eyes fixed straight on the door. Emma didn't move. She'd seen stray dogs before. The woods nearby weren't empty, and people sometimes dumped animals they didn't want anymore. It was cruel, but common. She didn't call out, just watched. He didn't flinch. He was just standing there, waiting. Later, the neighbors would say, "That dog? He doesn't go near anyone. Don't waste your time. Won't even take food if you leave it out." But Emma wasn't most people. And that dog, there was something different in his stare. It wasn't hunger, not fear either. It was a kind of tension. Like someone at a closed door who wasn't sure if they were allowed to knock. That night, she opened a can of chicken soup and set it on a plate. She took it outside and placed it at the edge of the porch. Not close, not far. Then, she went back inside and turned off the light. She didn't sleep. When she checked the window the next morning, the plate was clean. Licked so thoroughly it shimmered. The ritual began like that. Every evening, just before dusk, Emma would put something out. Tuna, leftover stew, once even scrambled eggs. And every morning, the plate would be spotless. But she never saw him eat. He only appeared before dusk. Never close. Always watching from the same place. Half in shadow, half in the open. She didn't name him. Didn't talk to him. Not yet. She didn't want to scare him. Or worse, want something from him he couldn't. Give. Day 9, it rained. Not the lazy drizzle of early fall, but a full, furious storm. Thunder cracked above the hills like the sky itself was tearing. Emma stood by the front window, heart aching for the dog, wherever he was. She almost stepped out onto the porch to look for him. Then she saw it. A shadow curled on the doormat, soaked through. He was lying there, not scratching to get in, not whining. Just curled in a perfect, miserable ball, his massive frame trembling with each rumble of thunder. She opened the door slowly, heart thudding. He looked up, and she froze. Because in his eyes, she didn't see fear. She saw a plea, silent, hesitant, but desperate. But he didn't move, didn't step forward. "You can come in," she whispered, voice trembling. "I won't shut the door. Nothing. Just rain. And a dog who seemed to believe the world wouldn't let him through thresholds anymore." She laid a folded towel by the door, left the light on, went to bed and didn't sleep. In the morning, The towel was wet, the plate was empty, and the dog was gone. They said he'd never come inside, that he didn't belong to anyone, that he was part wolf, or wild, or broken, a ghost of the forest, a leftover thing. But Emma knew better. She'd seen how he looked at the door, not with wildness, not with violence, but with restraint, like he'd been turned away before. Day 14, she sat on the porch, not to wait, just to be. She brought out her book, an old worn copy of something she'd read dozens of times. Didn't read a word. She could feel his gaze before she saw him, like static at the edge of a storm. He stood there, the same place, always, as the sun dipped low and painted the leaves gold. She didn't look directly at him, just kept, her eyes on the page. "I don't expect you to come in," she said softly, "but you should know. You're not alone out here." The next night, he came 2 steps closer. She didn't tell anyone, not the mailman, who already looked nervous about the weeds overtaking her yard, not Mrs. Darden next door, who believed everything needed to be reported or fenced in, not even her sister, who called once a month and always asked, "Are you doing anything to get out more?" No, this was between her and the dog, or rather, between her and the quiet understanding building between them. One built not on command, but invitation, not on need, but presence. Day 20. He stood at the base of the porch steps, close enough that she could hear him breathing. She set down a plate with roasted chicken. Real chicken. Her own dinner. Sacrificed. He didn't touch it until she went inside. But when she peeked through the curtains 5 minutes later, he wasn't just eating. He was sitting, facing the door, like he was waiting for someone to open it and say, "Welcome home." Emma didn't know what made her leave the door unlatched that night. Maybe it was foolishness. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was the fact that the silence inside the house had grown just a little too loud. She turned off every light but the one in the hallway, left a towel near the door again, and placed a single word in her chest like a prayer. Please. She didn't say it aloud, didn't dare. But somewhere, somehow, the dog must have heard it. Because at 3:17 a.m., she awoke to the softest sound, not of scratching, not of whimpering, but of breathing. And when she tiptoed down the hall, bare feet silent on cold wood, she saw him, not inside, not quite, but lying across the threshold, half in, half out, as if to say, "I'm not sure I'm allowed, but I want to be." The threshold is a strange place, neither in nor out, neither safe nor exposed. It is a place of pause, a place where decisions tremble before becoming action, and that's exactly where he lay. Not inside my home, not outside in the dark, but at the edge of something bigger than both of us. Emma stood frozen, one hand on the wooden doorframe, the other pressed against her heart like she could steady it with touch alone. There he was, half of his large body sprawled across the doormat, the rest stretching over the threshold, just enough that his front paws touched the smooth hardwood floor of her hallway. It wasn't a mistake. He hadn't stumbled there. He had chosen this exact spot, and he was asleep. No, not asleep. His ears flicked when she exhaled too loudly. His tail shifted just slightly when the wind rustled her nightgown. He knew she was watching, and still, he didn't move. It was the first time the silence between them didn't feel heavy. It felt full of something unnamed. Not hope, not trust. Not yet, but possibility. She didn't reach for him, didn't speak, just quietly knelt, wrapped herself in the hallway's dim light, and watched his chest rise and fall. He smelled of rain and earth and wild things. But underneath it all, There was a warmth, a nearness that surprised her. She thought of her old dog, Max, who had passed 10 years ago. She thought of Ryan, her partner, who had passed just over a year ago. She thought about how she never opened that side of herself again, the part that invited something in, knowing it might one day leave. And yet here she was, door open, heart cracked, dog halfway across both. Morning came quietly. The world outside was soaked, the air cool and clinging. Emma crept out of bed, unsure whether the night had been real or imagined. But when she reached the front door, there was no doubt. The towel was damp again. The food plate was tipped on its side. And in the dirt near the porch, 4 distinct paw prints pointed toward the forest, but they hadn't come from the woods. They had led back into them. She should have felt disappointed. She didn't. That day passed like fog. She cleaned the hallway floor for the first time in months, rearranged the coat rack, took out the welcome mat, and replaced it with a new one she found tucked away in the storage closet. It read simply, "You belong here." She didn't know if he'd notice, but she did, and that was a beginning. By sunset, he was back. No hesitation this time, no distance. He came to the 3rd step, paused, and then, to Emma's astonishment, climbed up and sat beside the new mat. Not on it, not over the threshold, beside it, staring. Emma opened the door slowly, held it wide, stepped back. He didn't move. "I'm not going to push you," she whispered, folding her arms. "But I'm not going to shut the door either." The wind swirled between them. He blinked and stayed. The neighbors started to notice. "I saw that mutt at your place again," Mrs. Darden said 2 days later, holding a paper bag of groceries a little too tightly. "That's the one the Wilkes boys tried to catch last winter. Mean as a bear. Didn't let them near him." Emma didn't answer, just nodded, thanked her, and closed the door. She didn't care what the boys tried to do. She cared that the dog hadn't let them. By day 28, she was calling him Bear. It wasn't a name she gave lightly. It was a name she whispered one morning when he lay stretched across her porch, sunlight warming his thick coat, his breathing easy and slow. "Bear," she said, almost like she was testing how the word fit in the air. His eyes opened. He didn't flinch, didn't turn away, just watched her. And she knew. He had accepted it, not as a name, but as something between them. He still didn't step inside. Not fully. Every night he returned to the threshold, sometimes to sleep, sometimes just to sit. But he never crossed the line into the hallway, no matter how wide she opened the door. And Emma didn't ask him to. Some things took time. Some trust could not be rushed. She'd once spent 5 years learning how to love someone who wouldn't open up. And when Ryan finally had, it was already too late. The illness had hollowed out the years he might have lived with ease. And though she never blamed him, she'd learned to recognize the slow dance of letting someone come to you on their terms. So she waited. Again. Only this time, she wasn't waiting in despair. She was waiting in choice. The turning point came on, a Tuesday morning, cold, early. Sky still pale. Emma opened the door to take out the trash and stopped dead. Bear was not at the door. He was in the hallway. Not deep, just a few steps, but unmistakably, undeniably inside. He turned when she gasped. Didn't run, didn't retreat, just stood there, head tilted, tail still. "You," her voice trembled. "You came in." Silence. Then, almost like answering her awe with something practical, Bear padded softly over to the towel she always left and lay down. As if he'd always belonged there. As if the house had been waiting, just for him. From that day forward, Bear began to test the edges. He wouldn't venture into other rooms. Wouldn't touch anything. Wouldn't eat unless the bowl was just beside the open door. But he stayed longer, slept sounder, watched her move around the kitchen with quiet eyes that held no fear, only calculation. He wasn't worried she'd hurt him. He was watching to see if she was real, if this peace was permanent, if she meant what her open door had said. The news spread fast. The stray went into Emma Holloway's house. No way. That beast? He doesn't even let people look at him. I saw it. She was brushing his fur, like some kind of magic trick. But Emma didn't explain. She didn't tell them about the nights she talked to Bear softly in the hallway, about the way he pressed his head near her knee when the wind howled too hard, or the time she cried in the middle of peeling potatoes, and he sat by her feet and stayed until her shoulders stopped shaking. They wouldn't understand. Not because they were cruel, but because some stories are built in silence, not in words. On the 33rd night, something shifted. It was raining again, a gentle, steady rhythm tapping on the windows. Emma had left the door open as always. Bear had stepped in, as usual, but this time, as she turned to go back to the kitchen, she heard it. Soft, careful. Steps. She looked over her shoulder. Bear was following her, not just into the hallway, but into the living room, and when she paused beside the couch, he sat, right beside her, inside the house, inside her world, inside the space no one had entered since Ryan's final breath. And Emma, for the first time in 427 days, smiled with something real behind it. Not the echo of a life that had been, but the beginning of one that might be. There are storms that come from the sky, and there are storms that come from inside us. One pounds on the roof and shakes the windows. The other builds quietly in the walls of your chest until something breaks open. The night bear came all the way inside. Both kinds happened at once. Emma had always feared storms, not the quick summer ones. She could handle a flash of lightning, a distant roll of thunder. But the long ones. The ones that came without warning and stayed. The ones that turned day into night and turned her thoughts inside out. Those storms always reminded her of the day she lost Ryan. The hospital had called during a downpour. She'd driven there soaked, windshield wipers frantic, heart louder than the thunder. By the time she reached him, he was already gone. No goodbye. No final squeeze of the hand. Just the silence of machines that had already stopped working. Since then, storms had taken on weight. And tonight, the sky cracked open. The wind screamed down the hillside like it had teeth. Rain pounded the windows in sheets and the trees bent, like they might break. Emma lit candles in every room, not because she expected the power to go out, but because the light made her feel less alone. Bear sat in the hallway, still and watchful. His ears flicked at every boom of thunder, but he didn't move, not until the lights flickered once, then again, then died altogether. Darkness swallowed the house, and Bear rose. Emma stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, heart tight in her chest. "Bear?" she called softly. She heard the faint sound of paws on hardwood, steady and slow. Then he was there, his massive shape illuminated only by the flicker of candlelight. He didn't hesitate this time. He came right up to her, close, closer than ever. He nudged her hand with his nose, and that was when she realized he wasn't afraid of the storm. She was, and he knew. She sank to the floor, legs folding beneath her like water. Her breath came, too fast, and the thunder only made it worse. "I'm okay," she whispered, lying to herself. "It's just a storm, just noise." Bear lay down beside her, pressed his body against hers. Not hard, but firm enough that she could feel the warmth of him. He smelled like damp leaves and wet stone, but he was solid, real, present. She buried her hand in his thick fur, and for the first time in over a year, she didn't cry alone. They stayed like that for what felt like hours. The storm raged outside, the windows rattled, the wind screamed. But inside that small circle of candlelight, Emma was safe. Bear didn't move, not even when the walls groaned and the trees scratched their long fingers across the roof. He kept his eyes open, watched her, grounded her. Eventually, her breathing slowed. She leaned her head against his neck and whispered, "You're not what I expected." He didn't answer, of course, but she felt the low vibration of a sigh ripple through him, like he understood. By morning, the storm had passed. The world outside was a ruin of broken branches, flooded ditches, and snapped power lines. But the sun rose, gold and soft, as if nothing had ever gone wrong. Bear was already awake when Emma opened her eyes. He was watching her, still beside her, still inside, still hers, even if only for now. Later that day, she took a bold step. She moved the food bowl from the doorway to the kitchen. She didn't call him, didn't coax, just filled it, placed it on the tile floor, and sat quietly in the living room. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. She almost gave up. Then, the soft sound of nails on tile. He came, slow, cautious, every step deliberate. He reached the bowl, sniffed, looked at her, and ate. From that day forward, the house was his. Not in the possessive way dogs claim space, but in the way one learns to belong. He never chewed furniture, never jumped on beds. But he followed Emma room to room, lay at her feet when she read, waited at the bathroom door while she showered. She got used to the sound of him breathing at night, got used to the weight of his gaze on her when she moved too fast, or when a certain memory flickered across her face. And slowly, very slowly, the storm inside her began to ease. It was on one of these calmer days, about a week after the storm, that Emma ventured into the back room, the one she hadn't opened since Ryan died, his office. Nothing had changed. The air still smelled like cedar and aftershave. His notebooks were still stacked in neat piles. His favorite mug sat on the desk, cracked but not broken. She stood there for a long time, not touching anything. Bear appeared behind her. She hadn't heard him come. He didn't bark or whine, just sat beside her and looked around the room with quiet eyes. "I haven't been in here since..." She stopped herself. Didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Bear understood. He stepped into the room, padded over to the desk, and sat. And something broke in her. Not a violent break. Not pain, just space. Space for breath. Space for healing. Space for him. That evening, Emma left the door open. Not just the front door, but the office door. She lit a candle, placed it by the photo of Ryan on the desk, and whispered, "Thank you." Then she turned and found Bear lying in the doorway, one paw stretched inside the room, guarding it, guarding her. That night, she dreamed of rain again. But this time she wasn't running. This time she stood still in the middle of a field, arms open, and let the storm pass over her. And Bear was there, not to protect her, but to walk through it beside her. Not all homes have four walls. Some are built in quiet moments, shared silences, and the soft weight of a body pressed against yours. When the world goes dark, but even the safest places can be threatened when others decide what belongs and what doesn't. Emma didn't hear the truck until it was too close. The engine rumbled over gravel like thunder, loud and out of place. She was planting herbs in the back garden, a sudden desire to fill something with green. with growth. Bear lay in the grass nearby, eyes half closed in the sun. It was the first time she'd seen him completely relaxed. And then came the voice. "Hey, there he is." Bear shot up, fur bristling. Emma stood quickly, heart in her throat. Two men stepped out of the truck. One wore a vest with a local shelter logo. The other, broader, older, carried a long catch-pole in his hand. "Heard you've got that stray living in your house now," the older man said. "We've been looking for him." Emma stepped between them and Bear. Her voice came out, sharper than expected. "He's not a stray. He's with me." The younger man looked uncertain. "We've had reports. Folks say he's dangerous, that he bit someone once. We have to bring him in." Emma's stomach dropped. Bear hadn't moved, but his body was tight, ready. "He hasn't hurt anyone," she said. "That you know of," the man countered. Emma shook her head. "He's not going anywhere." The older man raised the catch, pole slightly. "Ma'am, with all due respect, if this dog's unregistered and unchipped, he's considered public risk," Bear growled. Low, deep. Emma took a step back toward him. "I'll get him chipped, registered, whatever it takes." "But you're not taking him today." The two men exchanged a look. "We'll be back," the older one said, "with paperwork." Then they got in the truck and left. Bear didn't relax for hours. Neither did she. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a mug she didn't drink from. Bear curled at her feet. It had taken weeks to get him through the door. Now someone wanted to drag him out. She ran her hand through his fur. "I'm not letting them take you. I don't care what it takes." He leaned into her touch. No fear, just trust. And that only made her angrier, because she knew how fragile that trust had been, how long it took to build, and how quickly strangers could break it. The next morning, she drove into town. Bear stayed home, not by choice. She'd left him inside, the door locked, just in case. At the shelter, she asked for the director. A woman named Ruth met her in the front office. Late, 40s, tightly wound with eyes that scanned too quickly. "You're here about the dog, I assume." Emma nodded. Ruth sighed. "Look, Ms. Holloway, we've been tracking this case for months. That animal has been seen near several incidents, growling, chasing. He's not safe." Emma took a slow breath. "He hasn't shown a single ounce of aggression since he came to me. He's calm, gentle, scared maybe, but never violent." Ruth raised a brow. "You have proof of ownership?" "Not yet." "Then technically, he's still considered at large." Emma held her ground. "So what do I do? Make it legal? Tell me." Ruth blinked, caught off guard by her resolve. "You'd need to chip him, provide vet records, maybe go through a probation. Period. Fine. You'd also need to sign liability forms." "I'll sign them." Ruth hesitated. "There's a chance he won't pass the assessment." "Then don't assess him." Emma's voice cracked. "Just let him live." That night, she sat on the floor beside Bear. "Looks like you're going to the vet tomorrow," she whispered. "Let's hope you behave." He licked her hand. "And despite everything," she laughed, "not much. But enough." The vet visit was nerve-wracking. Bear hated the car. He shook the whole way, pressed against the back seat, panting. At the clinic, he froze in the doorway. Emma had to coax him through with soft words and steady hands. The vet, a young woman named Dr. Layla, was kind. "This, him?" she asked, crouching low. Emma nodded. "Bear." Layla didn't reach for him, just waited. After a moment, Bear stepped closer, sniffed, sat. "Well, hello, Bear," Layla smiled. "You're a big boy." Emma watched in awe as Bear allowed the examination. No growling, no flinching. Just wide, wary eyes and stillness. When the chip was placed, he didn't even yelp. Layla handed Emma the paperwork. There, he's registered. Yours. Emma stared at the paper like it was a birth certificate, a home, in ink. When they returned, Bear didn't rush out of the car like usual. Instead, he waited by the open door until she stepped out first. Then, he followed, step by step, like he belonged. The next days passed with a quiet kind of joy. Emma cleaned the office, finally turning it into a space for herself. She took down the photos that hurt too much, added books, flowers, cushions. Bear lay in the doorway watching. When she brought in a new armchair, yellow and oversized, he jumped onto it immediately and fell asleep. She didn't stop him. She sat on the floor beside him and leaned against the same armrest. Together, they built something between grief and growth. A middle place. A home. But peace is never without its cracks. 1 week later, a letter arrived. From the shelter. Final behavioral assessment required within 14 days. If the dog does not pass, placement. Options must be considered. Emma read the sentence 10 times. Placement options, meaning if he failed, they'd try to move him elsewhere, or worse. No, she couldn't let that happen. She called Layla. I need help. Layla listened, then said, I'll come to the house. I want to see him in his space. The following day she arrived. No clipboard, no lab coat, just jeans, sneakers, and calm energy. Emma opened the door. Bear barked, just once, then recognized her and wagged his tail. They went out to the garden. Layla observed in silence. Bear fetched sticks. Sat on command. Even let her touch his paw. I've seen enough, she said. Emma braced. And, Layla smiled, he's nervous. But he's not aggressive. I'll write the report myself. Emma nearly collapsed with relief. That night, she left every light in the house on, cooked a full dinner, put on music for the first time in months. Bear lay under the table, tail thumping whenever she looked his way. She raised a glass of apple cider and said, To us, to the house we made. He sneezed. She laughed, and for the first time since Ryan died, she didn't feel guilty for being happy. They said he wouldn't come inside, that he couldn't be saved, that he wasn't safe. But I knew. I saw it in his eyes. He didn't need a leash or a command. He needed a choice, a door left open. And now, I'm not the only one who leaves it open for him. The snow came early that year. Fat, slow flakes drifted down in late October, blanketing the woods in silence. Emma stood at the window with a mug of cinnamon tea, Bear stretched across the rug, behind her like a watchful shadow. It had been 63 days since he first stepped over her threshold. 42 since the vet certified him fit for ownership. And exactly 1 week since she received the final letter from the shelter. Assessment passed. Case closed. She had framed the letter, not out of pride, out of proof. Proof that trust could be rebuilt, that the impossible, a dog who wouldn't come inside, had chosen her house as his home. But nothing stayed still forever, and Emma had learned to listen to the subtle shifts in the air. It started with the phone call, a woman's voice, calm, firm. Hi, I'm calling about a dog. I think he might have been mine once. Emma froze. Excuse me? There was a dog, the woman continued. We lost him over a year ago during a camping trip near Black Hollow. Big, black fur, silver on the muzzle. We searched for weeks, gave up hope. But someone posted a photo, said he's with a woman named Holloway now. Emma gripped the phone tighter. I think that might be Bear. His name had been Atlas. He'd gone missing after a thunderstorm. The family had assumed. He ran off, They hadn't chipped him. They'd adopted another dog 6 months later. But now they wanted to see if he remembered them. Emma barely heard the rest. Her chest felt tight. She turned slowly. Bear was lying near the fire, watching her, as if he already knew. The woman arrived the next day. Emma didn't tell Bear, didn't change anything, didn't try to prepare him. She simply left the door open, like always, and waited. A silver SUV pulled into the driveway just before noon. A couple stepped out, clean clothes, nervous smiles. A young girl about 10 clung to a stuffed toy. Emma greeted them on the porch. They were polite, careful. And then they saw him. Bear stood just inside the hallway, framed by soft light and shadow. He didn't bark, didn't move. "Atlas?" the man said gently. "Is that you, boy?" Bear tilted his head, didn't step forward. The girl squealed. "It is him. Look, his ears are the same." Bear blinked, still didn't move. They came inside cautiously, sat on the couch. Called softly. He didn't growl, but he didn't approach. Not until Emma stepped aside and sat on the floor. Then Bear padded toward her. Slowly, calmly, and rested his head on her lap. Silence filled the room like fog. The woman's eyes shimmered. "He doesn't remember us." Emma looked down. "No, he remembers. But he's not your dog anymore." The girl burst into tears. The man sighed. "We won't take him. It's clear where he belongs now." Emma stroked Bear's fur. "He chose this place, after everything." They nodded, respectful, quiet, and left. The door closed. Bear looked up at her. Emma smiled through tears. "You stayed." He licked her cheek, and for the first time, she let herself cry with relief. That night, Bear lay beside her bed. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. She whispered into the dark, "They said you wouldn't come inside." She reached down and touched his back. Warm, steady. "But you did more than that, didn't you? You stayed." Weeks passed. The snow thickened. The fireplace crackled each night. Emma baked again, played music, talked to Bear like he'd been there forever. He met neighbors, walked beside her without a leash. She even started painting again, something she hadn't done since before Ryan got sick. And Bear watched it all, as if guarding her joy, as if he understood how much had been broken, and how much had quietly grown back. One evening, just before Christmas, she got a call from the local shelter. "Hi, Emma. It's Ruth. Sorry to bother you. We've got a situation." Emma stiffened. "Another stray. Young. Found half frozen near the ridge. We don't have space and, well, we thought of you." Emma looked at Bear, curled up near the fire, then out at the snow, then back to the door. Still open. Still waiting. She drove out early the next morning. The pup was tiny, shivering, more bone than fur, but alive. Emma wrapped him in a blanket and drove home slowly. Bear met them at the door. Didn't bark, didn't move, just stared. Then, to Emma's surprise, he stepped back, made room. For the first time, Bear opened his door. That night, the puppy, named Leo, curled in a basket near the fire. Emma watched Bear approach him, sniff, circle, then lie down nearby, close enough to watch, far enough to give space. And when Leo whimpered in his sleep, Bear reached out one massive paw and touched his back gently. Emma covered her mouth, because it wasn't just about Bear anymore. It was about what he had become, what they had become, together. The house no longer felt too big. The wind no longer sounded like ghosts. The silence wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. On New Year's Eve, Emma sat by the window with a glass of cider, Bear at her feet, Leo asleep on a blanket. Snow drifted down like feathers. And the front door? Still open. Not because someone was coming, but because someone might. "I never thought I'd find home again," she whispered. Bear didn't move. But he didn't have to. He was already home.